It's hard to think of anyone in Chinese history more famous, maybe more beloved than Li Bai. His poems, they just feel like they're part of everything, flowing so easily, like water. Even kids know them. But here's the thing, the real puzzle. Even though he's huge today, universally adored, it wasn't always that way. Not even close, really. He wasn't always understood or even liked back in his own time. So let's unpack this.
Yeah.
How does someone become that famous, yet in his own era seem almost like an imposter to some people, constantly having to, prove himself?
So today, yeah, we're going beyond that popular image. We want to peel back the layers, try to understand the complex man under the myth, and maybe why his journey to literary immortality wasn't exactly a straight line.
Exactly. That's our mission today, to explore why Li Bai was such a polarizing figure, what made him so unique, maybe even radically different from his peers, and what is this incredible, almost unteachable fluidity in his poetry. We're looking for those aha moments, the things that explain why his work hit so hard, even with all that historical back and forth. Okay, so when you think Tang Dynasty poetry, two names just top up, right? Li Bai and Du Fu. You picture them side by side, these inseparable giants. But here's where it gets really interesting. Their reputations, not always equal. In fact, for centuries, Li Bai's place, his status, it was kind of a battleground, a contested space in the literary world.
That's absolutely right. If you look at the mid-Tang period, there was this very clear tendency to suppress Li while elevating Du. Take Yuan Zhen, for example, big literary critic back then. Now, he admitted Li Bai was brilliant with Yu Fu. Those are the poems often based on folk songs, telling stories, social commentary, that sort of thing. But he flat out said Li Bai was far inferior to Du Fu.
Far inferior, wow.
Yeah. Yuan Zhen was pretty blunt. Criticized him for lacking structure, rhythm, that majestic tone, profound style. He famously said Li Bai is not even able to approach the outer walls of poetic greatness, let alone get inside.
Not even the outer walls. That is remarkably harsh, especially now when we put him right at the top. It makes you wonder, how could a genius, someone we see that way, be so dismissed by some of his own contemporaries?
Well, it wasn't just Yuan Zhen's opinion. It's widely thought that another major poet, Bai Jui, he likely felt the same way. This tendency to lift Du Fu up by pushing Li Bai down, it was kind of a thing.
Right, a thing. So the literary establishment back then, they were genuinely struggling with where Li Bai fit in the grand scheme of things.
They really were. And this critical feeling, it wasn't just a couple of guys. Even Han Yu, another absolute giant of Tang poetry, he felt he had to publicly state in a poem, the works of Li and Du endure, their radiance shines 10,000 leagues long.
The fact he had to say that?
Exactly. It suggests he was pushing back, right? Responding to widespread criticism of Li Bai, basically defending his place alongside Du Fu.
That's a powerful clue, isn't it? Han Yu, one of the greats, having to step in and actively champion Li Bai. It's just wild to think that a poet so beloved today needed someone to fight for his spot in the canon. It really shows how these things, these reputations, aren't set in stone, they shift.
They absolutely do. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, yeah, it shows a poet's standing is rarely static. It's alive. It evolves. By the time you get to the Song Dynasty, this suppress Li, elevate Du Fa idea, it got even stronger. It pretty much cemented Du Fu as the greatest poet for a long, long time. And even today, a lot of Tang poetry collections still reflect this. You often see more poems by Du Fu than Li Bai. That's a bias, really, that shaped how people read them for centuries.
So his climb to the top wasn't guaranteed at all. It was a long, tough fight. And it actually started even lower down the ladder, didn't it? In his own time.
Much lower, yeah. During his lifetime, the High Tang, many didn't see him as the best. There's this important anthology from that era, collection of the finest spirits of rivers and mountains. It heaps praise on Wang Wei, features him prominently, and Li Bai barely gets a look in.
Wow. That really puts things in perspective. How much things can change over 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Contemporary fame doesn't always mean lasting legacy or even full understanding at the time.
Precisely. Which brings us back to that idea you mentioned, the imposter poet.
Yeah, that Einstein analogy, how he felt like an imposter because people admired him but didn't really get his work. Li Bai might have felt something similar, maybe. His contemporaries saw the celebrity, the big personality, but maybe many scholar officials just didn't get, or maybe didn't like how unconventional his work actually was.
I think that's a brilliant way to put it. That misunderstanding he faced. And Du Fu, in his own poems, he gives us this really vivid look at how intense the feelings were. It seems like, those who loved Li Bai, they loved him fiercely, almost obsessively. And those who hated him, they despised him. Utterly. Du Fu himself wrote that line. It's so poignant, almost desperate. The world all wants to kill him, yet my heart alone treasures his talent.
The world all wants to kill. I mean, that's not just disagreement. That's visceral. Like he was a threat.
It really underlines what a spectacle he must have been. Not just a poet, but this phenomenon. People reacted with incredible intensity, good and bad. He clearly stood out, made people uncomfortable.
Right. Which gets you thinking.
Exactly. It raises that big question. What was it about Li Bai, the man himself, that made him such a lightning rod? So loved by some, so hated by others. It points to something deeply unconventional about him, something fundamentally different.
Okay, let's shift then from his reputation, this contested legacy, to the man himself and some of those differences. We picture Li Bai, this incredibly bold traveler, fearless, roaming all over ancient China, climbing mountains, drinking by rivers. But practically speaking, how did he do that? Where did the money come from for all that wandering? And let's be honest, probably carousing. His background must hold some clues, right?
That's a really crucial point, and it touches on the mystery that still surrounds his origins. We have descriptions of how he looked from a follower named Wei Hao. He mentioned his eyes were piercingly bright, round like a leopard's, and his mouth large like a fierce tiger. Now, most Han Chinese traditionally have longer, narrower eyes, so this Western region style, as Wei Hao called it, was pretty distinct. It hints at a heritage that maybe wasn't purely Central Plains Chinese.
A Western region style.
Yeah.
Okay, that immediately sets him apart from the typical refined scholar official image we might have. It sounds more rugged and even a bit exotic.
It certainly does. And it's probably not just physical appearance. We often overlook the culture of the Longyu region that's west of Mount Long. This culture was actually incredibly important. Founded dynasties like the Sui and Tang, Li Bai came from that direction. The wind he brought, as some described it, it blew from the northwest. This wasn't just geography, it was like a cultural vibe. In essence, it made him inherently different from the Central Plains elite, gave him this distinct, maybe more uninhibited spirit.
Okay, so Li Bai wasn't just from the northwest. His whole being, his wind, came from a different cultural space. That makes sense, actually. Why he might have felt like an outsider, or why others saw him that way. But what about his actual family, his lineage, the specifics?
Well, he claimed he was descended from King Wuzhao of Western Liang, a guy named Li Gao. If true, that would make him distantly related to the Tang emperors themselves. But significantly, the imperial family never officially acknowledged him.
They didn't. Okay, that lack of recognition for such a bold claim, it adds another layer, doesn't it? More mystery, more outsider status.
It does, and it fuels speculation about his real origins. There's a pretty compelling theory about why his background might have been kept quiet, almost like a family secret.
A family secret. Okay, I'm intrigued. How could that explain things, like his life choices?
Well, the theory goes something like this. His family moved to the western regions, maybe around the end of the Sui dynasty, and then later they secretly returned to Tang territory, settled in Jiangyu in Sichuan. Now, Jiangyu is known as an area with a mix of Han Chinese and other ethnic groups. This idea of a secret return, it makes you wonder why.
Yeah, why the secrecy?
Maybe they'd been involved in something, a rebellion against Empress Wu Zetian, perhaps, or maybe some past family crime they needed to escape.
Whoa, a hidden past involving rebellion or crime. That's quite something. And that could explain one of the biggest questions about his life, right? Why he never took the big imperial exams, the Jinshi exams. That was the main way to get ahead, become an official.
Exactly. Tang law was pretty clear. Families of merchants and artisans are not permitted to enter the ranks of scholar officials. Plus, if your family had a criminal record, you were also barred from the exams. So it's entirely possible, even probable, that one or both of these applied to Li Bai. It meant the main door to officialdom, the standard path, was basically closed to him.
So what does this all mean for how we see Li Bai? His not taking the exams, it wasn't necessarily lack of talent or even lack of ambition. It might have been a societal barrier, a hidden past maybe? And that pushed him onto a different path, didn't it? An unconventional one, trying to meet powerful people directly, approaching ministers as a commoner, using his reputation, his personality, which eventually got him noticed by Emperor Xuanzong.
Exactly. It paints this picture of a man who had to forge his own way because the usual doors were shut. He turned what could have been a huge disadvantage into something defining, a core part of his unique identity.
Okay, so all these threads, the mysterious background that unique Western regions feel, the challenges he faced, his distinct personality, that wind from the Northwest, they all kind of weave together, don't they? To create this poet who was just, unlike anyone else. He Zizhong called him a banished immortal. And when you look at all the different things influencing him, you really start to see why that name stuck.
You really do. Li Bai's whole approach, his philosophy, it was this incredible mix of different, sometimes even contradictory ideas. Take Taoism. He wasn't just dabbling, he was a genuine practitioner. He received talismans, registers that shows real commitment.
Right.
And this spiritual side, it soaked into his poetry, filled it with images of the ocean, mirages, immortals, illusions, cosmic wonder, ephemeral beauty.
Right, which is so different from someone like Du Fu.
Totally different. Du Fu had that mindset of the Central Plains, you could say. Rooted in the earth, in human experience, social problems, suffering, the cycles of life and government. Du Fu grounds you in history, in morality. Li Bai often sends you soaring.
That makes perfect sense. You feel that cosmic, almost unbound quality in Li Bai, whereas Du Fu often feels very connected to the ground, to human struggle.
Exactly. Think of Dreaming of Tianmu Mountain. You get cloud lords, tigers strumming zithers, phoenixes pulling chariots. Or lines like, half a cliff reveals the sea sun. In midair, I hear the rooster of heaven. His imagination just wasn't tied down to the everyday, but surprisingly, he wasn't completely detached from earthly ambition either.
No, he wasn't. He had that other side too, didn't he? That very classical Confucian side, aiming for a lasting legacy.
Absolutely. In some of his early poems, The Ancient Heirs, he's very explicit about it. He talks about wanting to edit and transmit, to leave a shining legacy for 1,000 springs. Just like Confucius, he even mentions capturing the Kulin. That's a direct nod to the end of Confucius's great historical work. So yeah, he absorbed and respected these mainstream cultural values, even while being so different himself.
And then there's the knight-errant side, the swashbuckler who actually practiced swordsmanship. It's such a striking image, almost clashes with the Taoist recluse or the Confucian scholar.
Yeah.
But it's all him.
It is. He famously boasted, kill one man in 10 steps, leave no trace for 1,000 miles. That's pure Yuxia spirit, the knight-errant. These were wandering swordsmen, figures of chivalry and justice, often outside the official system. And Li Bai really admired guys like Liu Zonglian, a hero from the Warring States period, who helped people but refused rewards or official posts. He saw him as a role model. It shows this strong belief in individual action, personal honor, over just climbing the bureaucratic ladder.
So a Taoist immortal, a Confucian scholar, a wandering knight. Wow. What about his poetic heroes? Who shaped his actual writing style?
Well, in poetry, he had huge respect for Shitiao. He was a landscape poet from the Southern Dynasty's period. Li Bai loved Shitiao for his pure and true Qingzhen natural beauty. And that term, Qingzhen, it's loaded with Taoist ideas. Spontaneity, effortless truth, a spiritual link to nature. Very different from more rigid, formal, poetic styles. You can really feel that influence in poems like Sitting Alone on Jingting Mountain.
Ah, yes. Flocks of birds have flown high and away. A lone cloud drifts idly by. We gaze at each other, never tiring. Only Jingting Mountain and I. That quiet serenity.
That's pure Qingzhen, understated, serene, deeply connected.
Okay, so all these different pieces, his background, the challenges, the personality, these diverse philosophical threads, his poetic models, how do they all come together? What creates that unique, almost magical style, that thing that makes his poetry just so memorable, so inimitable?
I think they all culminate in what we can call the fluidity of his poetry. And by fluidity, I mean his poems are just filled with this incredible musicality. It's often less about telling a precise, literal story step by step. It's more like a life force eruption, where the specific words, though beautiful, might not even be the most critical thing. Instead, it's about the pure feeling, the sheer energy that comes through. Almost like listening to music. It's like speech that transcends meaning, aiming to just sweep you away.
So Li Bai's poetry, it's less about exactly what it says and more about how it makes you feel. A direct emotional hit, not a logical argument?
Yeah. Precisely. Think about that bit from Dreaming of Tianmu Mountain again. 1,000 crags and 10,000 turns. The path uncertain, lost among flowers, leaning on a rock, suddenly dusk falls. Bears roar, dragons chant, shaking the rocky springs, terrifying the deep forests and startling the high peaks. He wasn't worried about strict logic or linear narrative there. He was trying to convey this visceral, almost dreamlike journey, this powerful life force that just washes over you, hits your senses, your emotions. And that was pretty revolutionary. A lot of Tang poetry was much more structured, more narrative.
What's really fascinating, though, is how he often seems to contradict himself. Like in Dreaming of Tiananmen Mountain, he builds up this glorious, amazing illusion, immortals, incredible landscapes. And then at the end, he seems to just pull the rug out. saying something like, "Ah, well, the pleasures of the world are like this too. Everything just flows away like water." He creates this stunning world, then kind of dismisses it as fleeting.
And that right there, that's where his genius really shines. And it's why we, as readers, forgive those contradictions. If another poet, maybe a more conventional one, tried that, it just wouldn't work. The logical leaps would feel jarring, wrong. But with Li Bai, because of that fluidity, that musicality, the illusions he creates are so powerful, so full of raw feeling, that you, the reader, you just kind of abandon your own reason for a moment. You stop worrying about whether it all adds up perfectly logically. You're just swept away by the emotion, the energy, the sheer spiritual grandeur of it all.
You sort of become part of his world instead of standing outside dissecting it, like an act of emotional surrender.
Exactly. It feels like for a moment when we read Li Bai, our own surname becomes Li. And once that happens, who cares about logical problems? He's just unfolding his life force, completely uncontained. This is why he really is a banished immortal, a star fallen from heaven, someone you just can't copy. His poetry is inimitable because his spirit, that unique blend he had, and that revolutionary fluidity, it was absolutely singular.
So we've gone from this poet who was, frankly, deeply misunderstood by a lot of his peers, to a man with this mysterious background, these incredibly diverse influences, whose unconventional life really shaped his art. His poetry just blew past the norms of his time, didn't it? Embracing this unique fluidity that became his immortal legacy. He was a paradox, a legend, yeah, a force of nature, a truly inimitable spirit.
And maybe, just maybe, in that primal emotional connection his poetry makes with us, even now, maybe Li Bai finally gets that universal understanding that kind of escaped him in his own lifetime. He really stands as this testament to the power of one unique, uncontainable spirit, whose words hit us on a level deeper than just logic, transcending time, transcending culture. It really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? What other huge figures from history, people we think we know so well, are still waiting for us to truly understand their depths?
Now let's take a closer look at the life of Li Bai. If you found this discussion useful, maybe learned something new, definitely hit that subscribe button. We do these deep dives regularly, exploring valuable ideas.
We appreciate you tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.